Good day, everybody, and welcome to our Coffee and Cloud series online event, 6 Steps for Email Deliverability and Security. My name is Alan Falcon. I'm the CEO of Cumulus Global, and I want to thank you for taking a few minutes out of your busy day and week to join us here today, whether you're here with us on the live session or you're viewing and listening to the webcast recording after it's been posted on the website. For those of you not familiar with the Coffee and Cloud series, this is intended to be a very quick hit, on target and focused. So hopefully I'm not speaking for more than about 10-15 minutes. I'll then wrap things up, but I'll stay on the line for any Q&A. If at any point during the session you have a question that you'd like to ask, along the top or right-hand side of your screen, there's an icon. Please use that to open the questions window. It lets me track to make sure we get them all answered. And if it's something that is more specific to your needs, it'll give me your contact information. I can follow up with you after the session. We can find a time to chat. You'll notice the audio for the session is muted. That prevents any background noise from getting in the way. So that questions window is the best way to get in touch. And as always, this session, as I mentioned, is being recorded. We generally get it up within 24 hours after we're able to do the processing, get it loaded, and get everything configured. This Coffee and Cloud series is one of 2 webcasts and online event series that we offer, our other being every third Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, a slightly longer format, about a half hour of content for those where this is meant to be more of a quick hit. We also have a number of bulletins, newsletters, a document library with white papers and ebooks. Feel free to tap into our resource center and find any information that you find useful for you. That said, I want to dive right into the content. Our goal here today is to cover 6 things that steps to take with respect to email deliverability and security. And really the impetus of this was the fact that Google and Yahoo formally announced that initially for bulk email senders, they're now enforcing email validation rules. And if you're not compliant with those rules, they're going to block your emails from the service, meaning you wouldn't hit any gmail.com, yahoo.com, or any business domain email that's hosted on any Yahoo or Google Workspace service. And while that's sort of a must-do for large volume or bulk emailers doing marketing email, the fact is what they're talking about and the requirements they're imposing are best practices for email deliverability and security today. So we want to walk through those so you understand what they are and what steps you need to take to make sure you're in compliance. So the first step, or the first of the 6, is send email from the right service, meaning don't use your primary email service for bulk or marketing emails. Both Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace have terms of service. Using those accounts for bulk email or unsolicited marketing emails is a violation of the terms of service, depending on the extent to which you do it. And if your service is flagged as doing it, you may get a warning, but you can just be suspended as well. And it can take several days, even up to a few weeks, to get your service restored. You also have daily sending limits out of your domains and out of each individual account. You don't want to run into those. And finally, those accounts, Microsoft 365, Google Workspace accounts aren't set up by default to comply with the CAN-SPAM Act, as well as other regulations around sending of bulk or marketing emails. Whereas whether it's a service, like HubSpot or Constant Contact or MailChimp, those services have built-in mechanisms to comply with US and other regulations with respect to opting out, opting in, and personal information maintenance and privacy. You want to make sure you remain compliant with all of those. Point 2 is you want to validate your SPF record. What is SPF? It is called Sender Policy Framework, and it's part of your domain name services. So domain name services, or DNS, is basically the address book that tells people how to contact you. So DNS-A records or address records give the address of your website. So someone types in yourbiz.com and it hits a DNS server from the web browser. It looks it up, says, oh, DNS is at this IP address, knows how to route your request for information, and then the web server knows how to get that information, what IP address you're coming from, how to send it back to you. So Sender Policy Framework lists valid sending IP addresses for email. So this would be, you would include information about your Google Workspace or your Microsoft 365 account, as well as any and all other email services that you might be using. So if you've got Constant Contact or MailChimp or HubSpot or Salesforce, and you're using those for marketing emails, you want to follow that service's instructions for adding their senders to your SPF record. If you have a website that sends an email only to your inbox when someone submits a form, you want to make sure that that address of the website is in your SPF record so that it's seen as a legitimate email message. And one thing people often forget when doing a sender policy framework record is you have to do one for every single domain that you want to send email from. So if you have multiple domains through separate accounts, or you have aliases. So for example, the legal name of our company is Horizon Info Services, LLC. We have a domain, horizoninfoservices.com. Our trade name, we do business as Cumulus Global. Our primary email address is cumulusglobal.com. We have SPF records set up for both of those domains within our domain name service within DNS. And so you want to include that, your primary, any aliases, third-party services, internal senders as well, which, as I mentioned, like your website back to your inbox. And SPF basically says to email recipients, this email is coming from a legitimate address. Now, of course, IP addresses can be spoofed, so SPF isn't perfect as a tool for keeping your emails being sent to spam. So a question that has come up, currently, the definition of a bulk email sender is if, has really been set, the benchmark's been set by Google. If Google's email services, whether it's gmail.com or Google Workspace domains, receive 5,000 messages or more within a certain time span, it's generally a 24-hour window, they'll see you as a bulk sender. But that's looking at it from the recipient side. Bulk email sending, if you have more than 50 email addresses on an email message, it may be seen as a bulk message, or if you're approaching or hitting daily per mailbox or per domain limits for sending email, you'll be seen as a bulk email sender as well. Other things can have you, trigger bounce backs as far as content of the message that might make you look like a spammer even when you're not. We'll talk about those in just a moment. So good questions so far. So after you validate your SPF record, you want to set up DKIM. DKIM is short for Domain Keys Identified Email, and this is an additional level of security and validation. And this is one of the protocols that Google, Yahoo, and others are starting to require before they let email land in inboxes in their service. And DKIM or DKIM adds a digital certificate to email. Effectively, it puts information in the email header that digitally signs the email and is a way to validate that the content of the email has not been tampered with or altered. Okay, and that's important because while ransomware is the most common form of cyber attack for small and mid-sized companies, the reality is business email compromise or impersonation is the most costly to survive, because those attacks generally involve pretty significant financial fraud in communications. And so while SPF says, hey, it's coming from a valid address, unless it's been spoofed, DKIM is saying, hey, it was sent by an authorized sending domain for my business, and you can see if it's got this certification that it hasn't been tampered with. So it's a way to guarantee that someone hasn't set up a relay and is taking your email messages, changing them, and forwarding them on. Okay. A key part about DKIM is if possible, and some email services don't really support it, and there's some complexities here, but you want what's known as a selector or a DKIM certificate key set up for every email sender possible. Okay, and it's important to note that if you're using outbound content filters, whether that's for outbound spam prevention, or even a third-party email encryption tool, implementing DKIM is more difficult to do. And there are, for example, outbound email filtering services that if you're using it, you cannot set up DKIM for your domain because your outbound email is going through a relay. And DKIM is going to go back to the original sender, not to the relay, and the relay service doesn't support it. Okay, so DKIM is a protocol that says, hey, the email hasn't been tampered with. There's a question about why you can't use it to encrypt emails. DKIM is not an encryption technology. So it serves a different purpose. You either need encryption offered by the email provider or a third-party service to get message level encryption. And I can talk about offline or at the end if we have time, different types of email encryption, because there is server-to-server email encryption that you should have enabled in well called transport layer or TLS security in encryption. That's different than having email message level encryption. Again, DKIM serves a different function than the encryption function. So that's 3. Number 4 is configure DMARC. Now, DMARC stands for domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance. And it's really designed to authenticate email origin. So you can't configure DMARC unless your SPF is set up properly, is correct and complete, and you have DKIM identifiers for all of the domains possible that are sending emails on your behalf. DKIM is a policy that gets set up as another set of DNS records or another DNS record, and it actually instructs recipients on how to process messages. So DKIM basically is letting the recipient know that the IP address in the SPF record that the email is coming from hasn't been spoofed, and it's validating with DKIM that the email hasn't been tampered with, and then it's telling the recipient, if you're not sensing that's the case, here's what to do. And it can be deliver it to the inbox anyways, throw it into quarantine, or discard it totally. In fact, those don't even have to be absolute. You can set up DMARC that effectively says, what percentage of things do you want saved or quarantined to spot check? The other aspect about DMARC that people often forget is reporting, and that gets back to conformance. For every email you send, the recipient is going to send an acknowledgement back that it was received and how it was processed. Was it seen as safe and delivered, or was it seen as a risk, and was it handled in accordance to the protocol and what you're telling the recipient you want to do? And those reports come back to an email address in your domain at the sender. Now, most people just set that up to be, a null address or an address where email comes in and you set up a filter and it saves it for a period of time and then deletes it. There is an advantage to actually having a tool that takes all those reports back, because manually it'd be impractical, takes all those reports back and analyzes them for you. The reporting can tell you if you've got legitimate emails being seen as spam. It can also tell you if someone is trying to impersonate you and whether or not those are making it to people's inbox. So it helps with deliverability because it's a better authentication that your email is legitimate, and provides the best security mechanism at this point to make sure that your email you're not being spoofed, domain or personal impersonation, or no one's intercepted your email and altered the content. There is one DMARC record and policy per domain. And you can set these up and run them in trial mode, or you can actually, and monitor what's happening, or you can turn it on, which tells the recipient to actually follow the instructions for enforcement that you've set up in your DMARC record. Okay, so that gets into, as I mentioned, the reporting feature. Reporting requires automation simply because the volume of messages you're getting back to go sort through these text logs of messages to determine patterns would be impractical. We recommend, we have a primary and other tools. We have one primary tool we work with that can be set up to monitor DMARC, and you can do that actually on a mailbox. Ideally, you cover every mailbox in the domain, but you actually license it per the number of mailboxes you have that it's tracking. And these reports and these systems will identify any deliverability issues, as I said earlier, valid email flagged as spam, or flagging security issues that might be coming up. And so we do have recommendations when we talk about cost per mailbox per month. Your plus or minus, the tools generally run list price for about $3 per mailbox per month. So another question is, most people set up some of these protocols. Who set this up? For a business owner, this is something we do. We offer as a service. I'll get into that in a little bit to help you, because this is technical in nature. One of the challenges, particularly when you get into DKIM and DMARC, if it's not set up properly, you can actually disrupt the normal successful flow of email. And so mistakes can be not just an inconvenience, but can actually prevent your email from going out and getting delivered, and can hurt your reputation as an email sender. So that's number 5. Number 6, we step away from the DNS protocols and the configuration, the tools, and we talk about email hygiene. Good to remind everyone periodically, because these practices tend to slip by the wayside, particularly as people start, we see more and more small businesses using tools to manage and enhance their email signatures. And it's great, you see email signatures with, GIFs that, have a floating, a moving image or a short video, tons of links, things of that nature. But when it comes to email, the content of your email can actually trigger it being seen as invalid or spam. So here's some best practices. 1, you want your subject line to be clear. You also want good preview text. The best advice we've seen, particularly with marketing emails where you're setting a specific preview text, is to have the subject line be the topic and the preview text being additional information. Think about a newspaper heading, newspaper article headline, and then the subheadline or the tagline, or the main heading of a press release and the subheading of the press release. Having those will differentiate your emails when people see it in the inbox, and you're less likely to be flagged as spam as well. In your email, avoid links to third-party domains, and avoid using shortened URLs like Bitly and some of the other products out there. Having multiple shortened URLs or having URLs that don't match the sending domain of the email will make your email look more suspicious and more likely to be flagged as an individual spam message and going directly to junk. You want to limit the links, the number of links, the number of images, and the number of videos in the email. Again, a lot of those will tend to be triggers, particularly if you're hiding the links, because spammers will often embed links behind videos or behind images that trigger downloads from bad websites in bad locations. If you do use a marketing tool, even though you are using a marketing tool that will be compliant and help you manage things like GDPR tracking, opt-ins, opt-outs, things of that nature, periodically, we do it once a month, make sure that emails that are bouncing, that are no longer valid, are being scrubbed from your sending lists, because if you have a high percentage of bounces, then your domain will more likely be seen as a spammer, right? Because if a spammer is going to send email message to 500,000 mailboxes, and if 400,000 are bad, they don't care. They've reached 100,000, and the effort to send 500,000 versus without scrubbing them versus 100,000 scrubbed is significant. So they don't care about the bounce rate. But if you have a growing bounce rate, or you keep sending email messages to ones that bounce, then it's going to look like, hey, you're not managing your lists. You look like a spammer, and you can run into trouble there. Include a proper footer, particularly on marketing emails. Make sure you have an unsubscribe and or an email preference link. It's always good to actually have a link that says unsubscribe for people to opt out, because a number of email recipient services look for the word unsubscribe if they suspect it's bulk email, is an indication that it's legitimate, it's coming from a marketing service. There is a way to opt out. And then behind that, just don't have the link. Make sure that process is easy to opt out or unsubscribe. Occasionally, I'll still receive marketing emails where you click the unsubscribe link and it goes and it wants you to fill out a 3-question survey and submit it before they unsubscribe. That's bad news. When that happens, I stop and I just literally go back in and mark it as spam and tell my email service anything coming from this domain is spam, just ignore it. Because to go through all that steps and provide additional information to someone isn't supposed to be there. Unsubscribe is supposed to be 1 or 2 click links. Ideally, single link opt out or unsubscribe. And so these 6 steps are really things that you can do. So your next steps is, the first thing is assess your needs. Oftentimes, if your web developer is managing your DNS service as well, or you have an email provider that's, whoever is providing your IT services and manage your email, they may have already set up DKIM for the email service they control. Probably would not set up DMARC without talking to you, but it's easy enough to see. Use one of the many tools on the web. You can look up your DNS records to see how the world sees them. You can see your SPF record. You can validate it's correct and complete. You can see if DKIM is deployed, and if you've got what's called a selector or that validation key, one for each sending domain or location, and if you've got DMARC installed, and if it's not only is the policy set up, but it's turned on and active. If you don't know how to do it, if you want help, you can contact us. Contact information is on the right-hand side of the screen for you. We're happy to do that for you, as a courtesy for attending today. We'll do that service you for free. The next, if you're not fully configured, you want to plan your solution. You want to get your DNS you'll want to get your DNS configuration squared away. And if you want ongoing monitoring and management of your DNS services, it's something we offer as well. Given sort of the nature and the urgency around making sure you have these protocols in place, we're currently offering everyone 30% off our standard fees for the DNS configuration work. We do it for a low fixed price per domain. And we're offering savings as well on subscriptions to our managed DNS service, where we update the setup as necessary throughout the year. And if you want, we can monitor the DMARC for you as well and alert you to any issues and help you resolve any issues that come up. And so the next step there is to understand where you're at. And if you want help moving forward in the right direction, contact us. You can scan the QR code in the upper right-hand corner, or hit us up by email at info@cumulusglobal.com. If you go to the bit.ly address there, CG intro call, you can actually see a calendar and schedule a meeting directly with one of our cloud advisors who can do the DNS look for you, the review for you right there prior to the meeting, have it ready for you when you meet, and talk through the service options to help you make sure you're set up and if you want the ongoing service and management. Okay. Another question that came in, what if your business is images and videos and you deliver links to download their files? Is there a better practice we should watch? If part of your business is providing people links to deliver and download files, there's steps you can take in the messages where you're providing a link to that service site. This is common with photographers and videographers. They'll provide links to service sites. Typically, those service sites are known as legitimate and won't be seen as spam. You don't want to throw them through bit.ly and do short URLs or customized URLs for them. You want to use the actual service link. And so there are other things that way. If you have specific questions about that, reach out and we can schedule time to walk through, take a look at what you're doing and see if it's going to be a problem. Okay, someone asked, It will link the recording be emailed out. Yes, we'll send you once the recording's available, we'll send out an email with a link to the recording. It'll also be at that point, if you go to our website into the Resource Center and click on Coffee and Clouds, instead of registering to watch this session, it'll say view my video or something along those lines, and it'll bring it up there as well. Okay. At this point, just because we've used the target 15, 20 minutes, I'm just going to take a second to wrap up and thank people for watching. I'll come back and answer questions, but I'm going to thank everyone for joining us for the live session or watching online. I'm just going to take a second to stop the recording, and I'll come back to answer additional questions.